বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা।
Hello everyone, welcome to Hindu Analysis for 20th August 2021. Let us begin with the first article today. US not interested in trade pact, Goel. So this is a bit of bad news. Given the economic condition, given the economic recovery situation in India, one thing that pundits were hoping was, pundit in the sense economic experts, so whatever you call it, who are experts in Indian economy and whatnot, and even the government was hinging its hope on the fact that India will be able to establish or agree upon a free trade agreement with America. Right, India and America's trade history is checkered, particularly the animosity or the bitterness that we experienced during the Trump era, post-Biden era are one and the same. First, when Trump came into power, their trade agreement, their trade team or their trade department or their ministry conducted a review and found that India to be violating of some of their rules and regulations. So Trump immediately removed us from the GSP listing, which is preferred status that developing countries enjoyed. So not only that, to rub salt on us, they said that India is not a developing nation, India is a developed country. On the other hand, Trump went on to the extent saying that India is a developed country, America is underdeveloped and still developing country. The irony there is palpable. But nonetheless, during the Trump era, one thing that we were able to achieve was we were trying for a mini trade deal with America. So after the GSP status was gone, what we were trying to negotiate with the Americans was a mini trade deal that would give market access to Indian manufacturers to American markets. While we were negotiating that, for whatever reason or for whatever reason, the mini deal became a full-blown FTA. No longer were India and America were negotiating on a mini deal, we were actually negotiating on a free trade agreement. So what is a free trade agreement? Free trade agreement is a simple agreement between two countries, right? That they are going to make a trading alliance or a partnership where there won't be any customs imposed on importing goods or exporting goods between both of their countries. There wouldn't be any tariff barriers. If there existed any tariff barriers, they would be taken away. And as a result of it, trade between both the nations would substantially increase, benefiting both the countries. So as a matter of fact, we were negotiating an India-US free trade agreement for the past few years that began with a rocky past, but nonetheless, Trump administration kind of enabled right conditions for India to be able to negotiate a free trade agreement with the American government. Now, in a big setback to us, the Biden administration decided that they are not going to continue negotiating the free trade agreement with India. The reason might be, there are multiple varied other reasons. Recently, Minister Piyush Goyal was also, he was made aware of the non-compliance of the Americans in furthering the negotiations between India and America with the FTA with America. They accused us at various points of time. Indian government was accused of adopting protectionistic tactics to protect our farmers or either our milk manufacturing or milk industry, because one of the key sectors where India has actually gained a lot of momentum in the last few decades is the milk sector. So for whatever reason, we were going back and forth, and nonetheless, the Biden administration kind of hinted at the fact that we are not interested in a free trade agreement with India. So whatever the significant gains that India made in terms of achieving an acceptable free trade agreement with America have died down right now, right? The Trump administration was keen on working on it. They have actually gave out specific details as to what India and America are working on. And as of now, the US has clearly indicated that they are no longer interested or no longer looking for a new trade deal or trade agreement with India. So as of now, the FTA is dead in the water. So what is the way forward for us? The way forward for us is to go back to our mini trade deals. Mini trade deals means we are not only negotiating on an market to market basis. What we are going to be negotiating on is product to product or sector to sector basis. Right? Now we are going to try to negotiate on each and every issue. Simply put, those are mini trade deals. This is a big setback for us in the sense that if the FTA had gone through, we would have had huge success in gaining new markets. It would have certainly helped our own manufacturing sector, and again it would have allowed foreign investments also. So see, when let us say FTA comes through, let us hope that FTA comes through, what India essentially has is a free reign access and a preferential access to American markets. So what happens is other countries or other manufacturers or other investors who are looking to make investments in right places, looking at our access to various markets, particularly the American market, one of the most attractive ones, they would certainly come into India because we have an FTA with them, with the Americans, and they would invest in our manufacturing sector or our businesses. That would also boost FDIs into India. FDIs, according to me, are two types: one that matter, one do not contribute to the economy. Ones that contribute are investments into manufacturing sector, because at the end of the day, the more industrialized you are, the stronger your economy is. So nonetheless, that is a discussion for another point of time, but nonetheless, as of now, the trade agreement with the Americans is done, meaning we don't have further, because of the non-interest from Biden administration. We are interested, we actually are it would have been a good thing for us given the current economic climate. So what are our options, right? One option is to negotiate a mini deal, right? You go by sector or market by market or product by product. Again, that takes time, that again drags down. The negotiations are dragged for long periods of time, so that either one side breaks there or gives up their stance. The second thing is to explore possible FTAs with other countries. One of the attractive ones are the United Kingdom and the Australian markets. We have Tony Abbott, who was the Prime Minister of Australia, ex-Prime Minister of Australia, was in India earlier few days back before the Afghan fiasco, actually trying to negotiate an FTA with Indian government, right? One area where India and Australia are actively cooperating is to come up with an FTA. The second thing is the UK market. United Kingdom, post-Brexit, they are struggling a lot. They don't have the access to markets that they had when they were in the European Union. One of the biggest ways that they can show that or strengthen their economic post-COVID post-COVID recovery and post-Brexit economic strength is through having a trade agreement with India. They are trying to become an economic hub, which they were earlier when they were in the European Union. A lot of investments have gone out of UK into other parts of the European Union after Brexit, because they lost the access to the single market because they came out of Brexit. And in a bid to regain whatever that was lost, or at least to recapture some of it that was lost post Brexit, and to showcase that they are resilient to crunches of the COVID-19 or the shocks of COVID-19, UK is also exploring a free trade agreement with India. Now that is other countries. Let us look at our own backyard. That is our regional ASEAN groupings or RCEPs or whatever it is. The biggest hurdle for us right now is China. Why? When we try to negotiate with the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, that is RCEP, they had 15 countries. India was also negotiating with it. We negotiated in the RCEP and the ASEAN for almost 9 to 10 years. By that time, the agreements were to be signed, when the signatures were to be made in that agreements, we saw that what China was trying to do. Once China starts sending their stuff into our markets, our manufacturing sector will not sustain the onslaught from the Chinese imports. That is why at various points of time, Indian government imposes dumping charges on Chinese goods, particularly Chinese steel. Indian steel manufacturers cannot compete with that of the Chinese steel manufacturers on capacity, size, and also at pricing. Capacity we can match to greater extent, but price is where they have advantage over us. Now, with the China factor playing a big spoil in regional trade agreements also, India is forced to negotiate individual free trade agreements, or at least trade agreements with other countries in our own region. So that's the issue with the American side right now, because of the American actions, because of the disinterest from the Biden administration to pursue an FTA with India. India, though it would have been an advantageous for not only India but also the Americans, because it would have given the American manufacturers access to a 1.3 billion strong market. But nonetheless, for whatever reasons, the US as of now are not interested in having a free trade agreement with India, forcing India to pursue mini deals again with America. So that's the issue. So moving on to the next article, arms and the women. That is, this article talks about women in armed forces, particularly permanent commission, giving them commanding roles, being made them eligible or accepting them into the National Defense Academy, and so on and so forth. So in February of this year, February of 2020, sorry, not this year, in February of 2020, the Supreme Court asked the government of India to abide by its own rule, which was that they were going to allow women in on permanent commission, right? They were trying to seek permanent commission to women officers at par with their male counterparts in armed forces. Now, the idea was that whoever are already enrolled or employed in short service commission, they be given command postings in all services other than combat postings. So let us understand before what is commanding position and what is a combat role. Simply put, it is self-explanatory. A combat role is something where you have to engage and fight with the enemy, right? Either you do it physically, or you use weapons, or you use some sort of a specialized military equipment. It can be a tank, it can be an aircraft, it can be anything. At the end of the day, you are on the battlefield, you are engaging with the enemy, and you are fighting with the enemy. That is what combat role is. Currently, India doesn't allow women in combat role. The second issue is the commanding position. Commanding position is simply a position where they act as, or they are appointed as, the officer or the head of a battalion, where they carry out independent tasks. They command the entire battalion. Whatever they say, the battalion has to do. Now, currently, commanding positions are given to ranks of colonel in the army. Women are excluded again. Women are not given commanding positions, right? So what has happening is, or was, that women were being given positions in the Indian Army. They were being inducted into the Indian Army since 1992. They were given short service commissions, SSCs, then they were extended to permanent commission to women. It was a slow process, but nonetheless the process had begun in 1992, but it didn't make enough progress to turn the army for the next generation. So we were still stuck in that old kind of a mindset where there was a lot of opposition in the armed forces itself, stating various things like the troops are not ready to take commands from an woman officer, because they were saying that it's a cultural thing, it's a role thing, whatever the reasons were. Women were not being given combat and commanding roles. When you look at other armies, uh, compared to us, they are little bit progressive, where we can clearly see women, particularly in the US Army and the United Kingdom's Army. You kind of see women officers in combat roles and in commanding roles, but not in the higher echelons of commanding structure of any armored force, whether it may be the Navy, either it may be Air Force. But compared to India, they were a little bit advanced in the sense that they were being handed commanding roles and also combat roles. Whereas in India, most of women post 1992 were relegated to non-combating roles. Earlier to that, they were largely relegated to the medical side of armed forces, not beyond that. Exceptions here and there, but nonetheless, uh, currently we are in a position where women are being inducted since 1992. Women are getting permanent commissions, but nonetheless, they are relegated to non-commanding and non-combat roles. Now this goes against the court observed, right? The court, Supreme Court observed that this goes against Article 14. And not only that, women are being denied their equal right, their right of equal opportunity in the army or armed forces. One of the areas where women were being denied their access or right to equity or equality was their ability to take the National Defense Academy exam. So when you look at the NDA also, right, NDA, the UPSC conducts the exam for NDA, and initially after passing out of the 12th standard, the kid gets into NDA, they write the exam, they get into NDA, they train there for 3 years. After 3 years, I think each individual student will go to their respective academy. If a person is selected for Air Force, they'll go to the Air Force Academy. If a person is selected to Navy, they get going to the Naval Academy. If they go to the Army, they go to the Military Academy, IMA, Indian Military Academy, or whatever it is. So they get separated into their branches of military. But nonetheless, post 12, they train, they study for 3 years in the National Defense Academy. Post that, they go. But what was happening was that women weren't being allowed to write this National Defense Academy exam. Now, it was, when you look at it, when you look at the facts of the case, it's simply that it's not a case of equality. Women weren't being allowed to write the exam. When the government asked why, when the Supreme Court asked the government why women were not being allowed to take the National Defense Academy exam, the government replied that it was a policy decision, and it's better not for the court to interfere in a policy decision. So again, this goes into, there is a little bit of history to it, but nonetheless, at the end of the day, the argument lies or starts or dies at the fact that the argument is entirely surrounded on the fact that it's a cultural issue, it's a sensitivity issue. The armed forces are not ready for women in combat and commanding roles. And again, you have to accept that this is still a problem where certain sections of the armed forces might not find it comfortable to, though it is sad to say, but nonetheless, something that has to be considered, where some sections of the armed forces might not be ready psychologically to receive commands from an woman officer. So nonetheless, the Supreme Court has passed an interim order allowing women to appear for the National Defense Academy entrance exam, and it has indicated that until the judgment comes out, you are going to conduct the exam, but whether the admission takes place or not, we are going to wait till the judgment is passed. Now, the bench specifically pointed out the fact that you are closing an essential route for women to enter into Indian Armed Forces, and this particular decision to be discriminatory against women. Now, as I said, the court even pointed out the fact that these kinds of decisions go against your own government's prior decisions. which was during the Independence Day speech. Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced that girls will be allowed or granted admission in Sainik schools, which was not done earlier. The idea was that this would allow women to prepare them for an equal role in life in military. So before moving on, let us understand what are the advantages. The advantages are huge. This would bring in a new pool of talented young people into Indian Army, which Indian Army needs right now. It needs some radical element that kinds of refreshes the entire ethos of Indian armed forces. This is again a welcome step, but nonetheless, still a lot has to be achieved in terms of equality of women in armed forces, not only Indian Army but also Air Force and Navy. Uh, though the journey is being done in an independent way, where each branch of armed forces are navigating their own way in terms of allowing women to take critical roles in their day-to-day functioning. But nonetheless, this thing where the Supreme Court allowing women to take the NDA exam is certainly a welcome sign. Moving on to the next article, back to basics. So when we talk about educational system in India, one area that doesn't get the coverage that it needs, or the concentration, or the resources that it needs, is foundational education. Foundational education is where a child gets basic knowledge that he needs or that they need to further their education. Right? Basics are important, foundation is important. The growth trajectory of a particular child depends on the fact as to how strong his or her foundation is. The better they are in basics, the better they perform in upper classes. The good they are at their basics, the good they become in their upper classes. The better understanding they have of the basics, the better they perform in upper classes. Remember, whenever you are studying your 12th standard also, you always go to your basics. You always go to your 6th standard or 5th standard, where you learn, particularly, let us take the example of mathematics. You take degrees, you take tan, theta, or whatever it is. You go to those earlier classes where you had the foundation of the concepts of degrees or whatever it is, and then you build upon in your next classes. That is, it may be your 10th, it may be your 9th, but your understanding of the concept, or at least your basic understanding of the concept, comes from your earlier classes, where the foundation for that concept or that idea has been laid during those years. There is a urgent need for India to work to improve the basic understanding, or to improve the foundation of our students or our children in our education system. Though the national education policy has been promising in one ways, where it lacks in reality is the approach that it took to address these core issues of improving a student's education in our country. One of the biggest losers of pandemic 19 were the kids of our country, or as a matter of fact the entire world, because of pandemic, because of the subsequent lockdowns that it had brought in. Not only the government imposed lockdowns, because of the uncertainty that surrounds this deadly virus, parents are hesitant to send their children to school, even though schools are open right now, even though we know the precautions, we know the signs, even though vaccines are being made available to children. Trust me, parents are still hesitant to send their children to schools, even if they are reopened. Even if half capacity, forget about half capacity, even if at 20% capacity, parents are not willing to send their children to schools. This is not only limited to private children, this is also private schools, this is also being seen in government schools. Now, because of the pandemic, families have lost income, their ability to earn a living, they are struggling to put food on their table. And at this point of time and in those circumstances, sending a child to school is a distant thought. As a result of it, you are seeing large number of children dropping out of school. On one hand, you have an education system where the foundation of the education is weak, right? With a weak foundation, they progress into upper classes. There they struggle. If you make any effort to strengthen their understanding of basics in upper classes, again, the results that you get out of it are not optimal. You are not, those results are not satisfactory because they have already had that developed thought. In order to change it, you need to add more resources than what we are throwing at it right now, but the results are not guaranteed. So you need to attack the problem at the basic itself. You have to ensure that education system in India addresses the foundational issue where the children are taught the basics of education or basics of a subject in a right and a fun manner. Whatever the system that we have adopted right now is not the right way. It has been proven time and again and again and again that the system that India has adopted to teach its kids and its adults is not optimal. For whatever reason, over a period of time, we adopted this rote method of learning where repetition reaps rewards rather than imagination or thinking. You are not rewarded for your imagination, you are not rewarded for your critical thinking, you are rewarded for your rote learning and mere repetition of what has been said earlier without missing a beat. So when you say that Indian educational system suffers from structural issues and policy issues, forget about the policy aspect of it. There are some structural issues that need to be observed. First, we have this inability to teach kids the basics, right? Then we try to solve the problem by teaching those same basics at upper ages, which doesn't bring out the results that we need, because that is not the right way to approach it also. Even if there is a possibility to teach those things in a right way, we don't have that approach because again we lack resources. The third aspect of it is the method that we adopted to teach the kids is not even optimal in a way, or isn't even fun. It kills everything that it touches. Now, of all these aren't enough to put roadblocks in front of our kids or the educational system, we have the issue of hunger, nutrition on top of all these things. One of the biggest success stories that we discussed in earlier classes is how successful the midday meal scheme had been on next generation of kids rather than the generation that took part in that program, where we saw malnutrition or the number of malnutrition cases being reduced to a good number in the families that were benefited from midday meal schemes. Now the international standard says that a healthy kid, middle-aged kid, irrespective of their group, irrespective of their gender, they need to consume anywhere between 1000 to 3200 calories per day. So that is the ideal optimum calorie intake that a kid needs to have a healthy growth and have a normal healthy childhood, so that they don't lack any malnutrition in them. So that is one thing, that is the required international thing. The second thing that we talked about is the teaching methodology that we approached, that we have. The lack of basics means that students are falling behind, they struggle. It is written, they struggle, they don't know the basics, they don't have the understandings of the basics. Then you expect them to learn much advanced stages of the same subject for which they don't have the basics for. Then what would be the general outcome? The common sense outcome would be that they would struggle, they'll fail. They're set up to fail in that way because they don't have the basics. Even if you try to teach them the basics, the results are not optimal because it is difficult to teach. So there are a lot of things that goes into it. Again, it becomes a problem. And the UNDP Human Development Report of 29 states that students who don't have basics in a proper way fall behind and they struggle and their learning level gets a hit or takes a hit, right? If a classroom or a group of students are being taught subject that is 7th class standard, but the kid in the class in the 7th class doesn't have the basics for the 7th class, they are going to struggle in that 7th class, because whatever the basics that they have to learn from, let us say, first to 6th standard, they didn't get taught, or they didn't know the basics, or they didn't had the ability to learn those basics. Now you expect the person who didn't have the 1 to 6 basics to directly go in 7th without the basics that they need to complete the 7th class, so they generally fall behind. What are the drawbacks of falling behind? They lose interest. If the family is from a socially backward family, they see that results aren't coming, they think that instead of spending money on this kid, let us put him into some other use where he can earn some money. So you get him, the dropout rate goes up. Again, there are subsequent knock-on effects on the individual and the society altogether. Now what is happening in India? Particularly, let us not talk about in India. What is the general scheme of things that happen? So generally students get promoted irrespective of how they perform. The foundational skills are not tested. In certain cases, in some cases, skills are also not tested. And what has happened? Because of COVID-19, even if there was a scope for these kids to be tested, because of COVID-19, exams were cancelled and kids were promoted. As a result of it, whatever the way that, even though not optimal, but nonetheless one of the ways that we had was to conduct exams and understand what was the retention capacity of that student of the subjects that he was or him her she were taught. Because of that, we don't have any structure in place to gauge a student on his retention skills, on his education, or what he or they had learned over the last 1 year, because we don't have exams. Since our entire educational system was centered around exams, final exams, annual exams, quarterly exams, we didn't bother to develop any other schemes or methods to test a child's intellect. So we hoped we kind of pinned all of our hopes on a single examination at the end of the year, where we decided that that kid knew everything and he is or she was exceptional and they should be awarded everything. So we centered on exams so much that we didn't develop any additional testing methodologies. Now we are scrambling to find them, but it will take some time. But nonetheless, the idea is there. That is the welcome sign. That is the positive aspect of it. The negative aspect of it, however unsatisfactory the examination method was, or unoptimal the examination method was, that was to gone with the advent of COVID-19. Now, how do you test a student's level? What about the students whose foundational skills were already lacking, and whatever the way that we could identify that he lacks foundation skills is now gone, so it will certainly have a knock-on effect on him in future upper class courses or upper level courses. Now even the national education policy that we have right now is right, it kind of provides or proposes a teaching freedom too. It kind of frees the teachers, because the curriculum is not content heavy. They kind of reduce the content curriculum. So the idea and the intent behind national education policy is right. They're reducing the load. They're trying to ensure that approach is not only based on instruction, but it's based on construction, right? You not only simply the teacher comes, they instruct and the student makes a notes and that's it. Instead, the curriculum is being developed in a such a way that there has to be an engagement between a teacher and a student by default. Earlier, what is the interaction between a student and a teacher? Either you are being given homework, or you are or she's or he are instructing to you, and that's the end of it. There is minimal scope of engagement between a student and a teacher. With the national education policy, or the proposed changes through national education policy, Instead of being an instruction based curriculum, it is going to be a construction based or constructivity based curriculum, which enables engagement between a student and a teacher and among students by default. Now the idea is good, the problem again comes to the surface. What about a student whose understanding of foundation or basic skills is underdeveloped compared to his fellow students? That is again an issue that needs to be addressed. Now when I talked about certain issues that NEP has in the way it has, or why NEP is also not sufficient to address the problems, is the way it tries to solve certain problems. When I say that they want to improve engagement and improve curriculum, that is all well and good. Then what about the core component of our education system, that is the teacher? Right, the NEP talks about interesting the development of a kindergarten children, the small kids, UKG, LKG, pre-KG, whatever you have. The NEP says that we are going to ensure that if irrespective of their if a kid is underprivileged or a kid is from an underprivileged section of the society, we are going to ensure that their intellectual development, meaning their basics, their ABCDs, their 1 2 3s, whatever it is, the basics that they need to develop, the seed for their basics takes from kindergarten age, and we are going to ensure that every year their basics are built right so that their foundation is strong. How the NEP envisions that to be achieved? That is through use of Anganwadi teachers. Using Anganwadi teachers and other helpers, the NEP says that we are going to pay 10,000 to 5,000 salary respective depending on their qualifications. We are going to ensure that these teachers whom we hire based on their educational qualifications, we are going to ensure that we are going to deploy them in underprivileged sections or areas, and we are going to ensure that kids from these underprivileged sections get their education. Now again, will that be a successful methodology? Again, time has to tell. The challenge that the national education policy has to address right now is to ensure that whatever the divide that we are seeing, right, the future is educational technology, right? It is through online medium, it is through digital medium that education will be disseminated in the future. If that wasn't the case clear earlier, the pandemic has ensured that that is the future in education. In the field of education, technology is going to play a critical part. Earlier it was relegated to teaching medium, not only teaching additions, right? It used to support teachers in teaching their subject. Now teachers are also using technology to teach entirely from different platforms. Now the challenge is to use technology to improve an individual's ability to learn and develop their cognitive skills. That should happen on an individual basis, and that should take on a personal support basis. And when you talk about developing an individual cognitive skills, it doesn't happen in a single day. It requires a lot of resources, it requires a lot of time. Whatever the cognitive skill development that we are talking about takes and requires a lot of time. That is how you ensure that a kid's foundation is strong. And one of those requirements for teaching or one of those things that a kid requires to develop his or her cognitive skills is a personalized support system. So that is one thing that Indian national education policy, if it wants to develop in a comprehensive way, must address. Now again, there are a lot of challenges if India wants to really successfully satisfy the fourth goal in sustainable development, that is education. Affordability of technology should be made, affordability of technology should be achieved, digital divide should be addressed. Certain methodologies that NEP talks about should be tweaked so that it takes away the pressure on the, it takes away the inability of a teacher to teach, or inability of a teacher to interact with other students doesn't impede the ability of a student to develop and learn their basics and develop their higher order cognitive skills that are required for our future generations. So these are the this is what the article talks about. It talks about developing new technologies, trying to address certain systemic and structural issues in the educational policy itself. It talks about the lack of nutrition, the importance of nutrition, the importance of retention of a student in a class, and most of all, the importance of imparting the basics of a student early on in their education so that they don't fall behind in their future upper level classes. Thank you. Stay safe. Namaste.
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি প্ৰস্তুতি আৰু অধ্যয়নৰ নিৰ্ভৰযোগ্য ঠিকনা।
বৰঠাকুৰ IAS একাডেমি।